Good afternoon and welcome to 28storms.com. This is your update on Tropical Storm Emily and the rest of what's happening in the Atlantic Basin. As of right now, Emily is the only system of interest in the Atlantic Basin, but we are working closer to the middle of August, so therefore it won't be too long until there is a second system to keep an eye on, but as of right now the main focus will be Emily. As of the 2 p.m. advisory from the Hurricane Center, maximum sustained winds have actually decreased down to 40 miles per hour, meaning that Emily is barely holding on to tropical storm status. Emily is moving off toward the west-northwest at 10 miles per hour, and it's moving ever so slowly closer to the Haitian coastline. And by the middle part of this weekend, near 8 a.m. Saturday, it's supposed to be in the Bahamas and not that far away from the Miami coastline. But notice that that cone of error has shifted ever so gradually toward the east, and that's because normally there is a little bit more forecaster confidence by that short of a period. So naturally the cone of error does shrink because it does take into account the average error in the past based on those time intervals. Anyway, the system is expected to remain just to the east of Florida and also curve or recurve out to sea away from the U.S. East Coast and also remain north of Bermuda. A look at today's tropical model plots reveal that there is still a split, with half of the models taking Emily into the southeast Gulf, whereas several models are still in agreement with the official forecast that recurves this storm to the east of the United States. And the problem with the model split is that the dynamical models are accurately seeing oncoming troughs over the central United States that should act to turn the system more out to sea, whereas some of the more statistical BAM models cannot foresee those changes in the medium range, and therefore they're keeping with a more west-northwest motion. Many of the tropical models are also showing steady intensification, and quite frankly I don't see how they are doing this. If we look at the latest satellite imagery in a moment, you will see that Tropical Storm Emily is on the cusp of becoming nothing more than a remnant tropical wave axis. This will have some chance of redevelopment once it gets into the Bahamas, but none of the dynamical models, and I'm talking more so the GFS, EC, MWF, and Canadian, none of those are actually showing any redevelopment, and I really think that you can write off just about all of these model intensity forecasts. As of 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, the hurricane hunters are flying through Tropical Storm Emily. They are looking to see if Emily still has a closed surface circulation, and they've made just one pass so far, but as of right now they haven't found any solid westerly winds, which could be an indication that this system has already degenerated into a wave axis. And I highly suspect that if that is what the recon finds, then the Hurricane Center will first downgrade this to a tropical depression at the 5 p.m. advisory. Looking at the latest visible imagery, it is somewhat difficult to detect exactly where the low-level center may be located. If I had to take a guess, it would be somewhere here just to the south of the coastline, but if we switch sources here and start looking at the latest infrared, we see that much of the convection is being sheared off toward the north, and some of the highest cloud tops are actually beginning to leave the center, and the land interaction and extremely high terrain of Hispaniola cannot be helping the organization of Tropical Storm Emily. And this has been something that I've been hyping quite a lot for the last 3 to 5 days. All along I've been saying that if this takes a track closer to Hispaniola, not only could that significantly change the intensity and structure of the storm, but it could also cause some model mayhem by causing a lot of divergence in the forecast tracks. And I don't think I could have said that any better, because obviously over the last 2 to 3 days the model divergence has been almost unprecedented if you compare that to the last few years of model guidance. Usually the models have been a lot more consistent and in a lot more agreement compared to what they have been with this particular storm. And if we look at the latest water vapor imagery, we still see that there is a lot of dry air the closer you get to Cuba, and you can see that the convection is easily being sheared off from southwest to northeast. The main problem, in addition to the extremely high terrain just to the center's north, is that the upper level environment truly is not all that favorable anymore. If you look at the latest Sims wind shear analysis, we actually see that the main pocket of upper level ridging has shifted more toward the southwest over the southern Caribbean, and in fact that's only going to induce the southwest wind shear directly over top the storm. As we can see, there's at least about 15 to 20 knots of shear exactly where the system is located, and normally that wouldn't be quite enough to dissipate a system, but when you add Hispaniola to the mix, that is not a good recipe for a continued tropical cyclone development. I know many people in Florida were liking the possibility of some additional rainfall, along with the chance of actually seeing a very weak tropical cyclone that they wouldn't have to worry about causing any significant damage, but unfortunately it doesn't really look like this is going to pan out. If anything, you may get some isolated shower activity. This is what the latest GFS is indicating. It doesn't even pick up on a low center anymore, and it just takes some of the remnant moisture across the Bahamas. We are now looking at the 21 to 24 hour forecast, so this is tomorrow morning. You really don't see any sign of a tropical cyclone anywhere close to the Bahamas by this point. And if we advance this a little bit more into the 48-hour spectrum, we see that yes, there is a very weak area of low pressure trying to close off here just to the east of West Palm Beach, Florida, but it's extremely weak, less than 1,014 millibars, with much of the shower activity located on the eastern flank of that low pressure center. If we advance this a little bit more, fortunately, the GFS does show some increased moisture and rainfall working its way into the southern half of the Sunshine State. This is now Saturday evening and into Sunday morning, so hopefully we still get at least some rainfall from this system before a much stronger trough begins to lift this out toward the northeast as we head into late Sunday and into the early part of next week. Also, this is completely separate, but look at the 96-hour forecast here. We're now looking at Monday morning. The GFS is taking a pretty strong tropical wave off the coast of Africa. It's just south of the Cape Verde Islands by this time. And if we look at the medium range and extended forecast, we see that the GFS continues to take this westward. And in fact, there's yet a second tropical wave exiting the coast that may have to be monitored here. This is the day 7 to day 8 forecast. And of course, like I said, we are getting into mid-August, so each one of these waves will have to be closely monitored. We are now looking at the 12Z CMC 850 millibar forecast, and the model is barely picking up on Emily, but you can see the remnant 850 millibar vorticity center here, located just to the northwest of Hispaniola. And now, much like the other dynamical models, it is taking whatever is left of Emily just to the east of Florida before recurving out to sea. And notice by day 6 here, we have a lot more activity over the central and eastern Atlantic. The model is not developing a tropical cyclone out here just yet, but this is just another indicator that the African wave train is about to become a lot more active. Turning very quickly to the 12C ECMWF, we see that the model by 24 hours takes this system, or whatever is left of it, into the southeast Bahamas. By 48 hours, the vorticity max is located just to the east of Florida, as shown by the other dynamical models. But then by 72 hours, that low is quickly lifting off toward the north as a second trough begins to come through between 72 and 96 hours. And then, of course, by day 4, the system has been fully picked up by that trough and is now moving well out into the central Atlantic while being absorbed by that trough. The rest of the Gulf, Caribbean, and Atlantic are looking quiet on the European through the next 4 to even 5 days. And it's not until we get closer to day 6 and day 7 with this particular model that it begins to show a very broad area of low pressure here near the Cape Verde Islands and off the coast of Africa. And by day 8, we see that this low is ever so gradually moving off toward the west. It looks like we may have about a week to relax and enjoy ourselves without having to worry about too much in the tropics once Emily does finally kick itself out to sea. But in about another week or so, we will be turning our focus closer to the eastern Atlantic. So just to sum up my thoughts on Emily, all the supporting evidence is there that Emily will degenerate into a wave axis within the next 24 hours. It will have some chance of redevelopment once over the Bahamas, but there's really not that much dynamical support for that. And even if it did, I think the max intensity will be a minimal to moderate tropical storm that will likely remain just to the east of the Florida Peninsula and then begin to recurve within 72 to 96 hours as we have another oncoming shot of shortwave troughing over the east coast of the United States that will turn this into the central Atlantic. But as always, we will continue to monitor the situation here at 28storms.com, so stick with us and we will have more on that potential tropical wave that will be exiting Africa in a week or so. So thanks again and have a good afternoon.